We're talking law again. Joining me is my brother John Reinberger. Thank you for coming. And we are talking with Tony Zdroik, whom Pete Orpett, the county attorney for Washington County, said will tell us everything we want to know about juvenile law and what's going on. So welcome, Tony.
Thanks.
Yeah, Tony Zdroik. Is that correct?
Zdroik is close enough.
Whoa, I know. When I saw that spelled, it was like, yes. What is your background, nationality?
My mom is from the Philippines,
Yes.
and my dad is Polish, so I'm probably the only Polipino that you've ever met in your
I'd
entire
have
life.
to agree I am, Tony.
So,
right.
a long history there. They met in Vietnam. My dad was in the Navy.
Cool.
My mom worked for the U.S. Navy.
Oh,
and
okay.
here I am in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Tell us how your trajectory into education and how you became into
Sure.
the county attorney's office.
You know, I started in Washington County actually as a public defender and worked here for about 6 months as a public defender and was approached by some people in the county attorney's office indicating they had an opening. And so then I applied. I got hired in January of 98. In 2005, when I was working for Judge Johnson, I interviewed for the division chief position in juvenile and was lucky enough to get that
Good.
in, I think that was May of 2005. And I've been in that position as the juvenile division chief since then. Doug finished out his term, and then Pete was elected. I believe he started in 2011, and I've been there since.
I've always been interested in the people who can go from the defender to the other side. Was that hard for you?
Yeah.
You know, and what's funny is we have a lot of people in our office who used to be former public defenders. So actually, the other division chief, Steve Urachuk, was a public defender in Hennepin County. And my dad was a police officer. So when I started working as a public defender, he was happy I was working, but
Yeah.
would have rather seen me in a different job. But,
Sure.
you know, being a prosecutor is about fairness. And I remember a judge telling me one day is, you know, as a defense attorney, you can get one person out of jail, but as a prosecutor, you can get 10 people out of jail. You know, because that's really what our job is. We had a young man in custody this morning, and I evaluated the case, and I just didn't believe that it was necessary for him to remain in custody. So we're still going to charge that case. But I think with juveniles, we treat them a little differently than adults. It's like as long as a child's not a danger to himself or herself, we don't need to keep them in custody. We need to get them back with their family and get them in the community and get them services, and that's really where that needs to go.
You have no idea how many questions I have to ask.
Was that
You better
right?
jump in,
I was going to ask you
seriously.
can you tell us about the division? How many people, or who's all? Is
Yeah,
it just you, or?
No, the
and then-
division is really varied. One of the
it
things
floats.
that Pete really pushed for, and we do a really good job of, is we have one attorney who's devoted solely to truancy. Because we look at truancy as kind of the first step to somebody really, especially young people, really becoming involved in our system.
Right.
So Betsy Urbis does an unbelievable job. She is, from September through May, she is meeting kids in the schools with their administrators, with social workers, trying to essentially steer kids clear of our system. And, you know, we went to, probably when I started in the office in 98, we probably filed about 140, 150 truancy petitions. So we got, you know, parents had to take days off of work. We took kids out of school to come to truancy. Last year, I think we filed around 30. And so that's what our goal is let's get these kids, their issues addressed right there in the community, right there in their schools, right there with their parents. And in most cases, then we're done. You know, then the child gets back on track. We also meet with students and parents twice a month, both in Cottage Grove and Stillwater, and just talk to them about the issues with truancy and how they can get help with that. So Betsy's devoted to that, and then we have 5 other prosecutors. 3 do child protection and 2 do juvenile prosecution.
What makes me a candidate, and I'm just saying if I were a youth for truancy these days, I mean, I skipped school today.
Yeah, what are the...
Probably
Yeah.
not,
you can
right?
see the things
Yeah.
like
But on the list,
factors.
maybe.
Well, if we get worried about it if you skip
Yeah.
school, because, you know,
Yeah.
the thing about truancy, when kids aren't in school, we get concerned about what they're doing. If kids
Right.
aren't in a structured environment, they're concerned. So Minnesota laws on truancy are fairly tough. A truant in Minnesota is defined as a child who is absent from school on 7 or more days for one class period on 7 or more different days. So that's pretty early intervention. We don't normally file a truancy petition at that point. That's where our whole process kicks in, where we try to meet with them in the group meetings once or twice a month. And then if the child continues to be truant after that, then Betsy goes out to the school and meets with them one-on-one. And only after that period, if we have issues, then we'll file a truancy petition. But Minnesota is particularly tough on truancy. Our office finds out about children who miss school at the 3rd day.
Interesting.
school. And
Wow.
Washington County schools are great.
Yeah.
They communicate with us right after that third day and let us know this child's having issues.
Yeah.
We may need you to get involved.
Yeah.
Wow.
So-
What do you feel, Tony, when you see a child commits a crime and it's certified as an adult? How do you internally feel on that certification as an adult?
Yeah, fortunately, we live in a community where we don't file a lot of those petitions. But, the way we've essentially dealt with that is we want to give kids an opportunity to develop through the juvenile system. Sending them to adult court where they have adult consequences, where they're not ready for adult consequences, is probably one of the most damaging things you can do for a young person. Because that will probably set them on the road to not get out of the system, but to ingrain themselves deeper in the system. We're fortunate in our community where we will file single-digit numbers of certifications per year. And they're on cases that are the most serious, the aggravated robberies, the serious assaults. We unfortunately have a situation right now where we're dealing with 4 young men who are involved in a rash of very brazen aggravated robberies where they'll walk up to somebody who's doing nothing but going to the grocery store and attempt to steal their vehicle through the use of a firearm. That's not typical juvenile behavior. That's something we need to treat more seriously. So those are the cases we're looking for, the ones that are really a danger to public safety. Kids who have repeated violations of the law, serious violations, those are unfortunately the children who will get certified to adult court. We don't do that a lot in Washington County, but I feel like we have pretty good judgment amongst our prosecutors that when we do it, we need to do it
It's
to make sure the public's
justified.
safe. Yeah, and public safety is really our focus when we do that.
As a child, what would get me under your jurisdiction, and I see, newspaper things where maybe you got a 6-year-old kid or something bringing a gun to school, or kind of different behavior.
Yeah.
I was just kind of where what the statute.
If you're looking at age, like just the other day we talked about a young man in Washington County who's 10 years old who just seems to be coming up on police officers' radar more than we normally see. In Minnesota, you can be cited and brought to court at the age of 10.
10. Okay.
We don't see very many of those at all. 12 is about the youngest age that we see for kids. Now we get really worried about kids who are that young and appearing in our system, because if you go do a little research on it, those are the kids that are going to step up their behavior as they hit puberty and as they start to develop, and as unfortunately with young men sometimes they get more aggressive in their behaviors as they get older. So those are the kids we definitely keep an eye on. We work great with social services on those young kids and children's mental health to see if we can get involved to intervene that way, as opposed to just bringing them to criminal court or juvenile court.
Some of these kids are pretty strategic. You've got to be able to feel these cons almost. Can you feel that after all these years? Wow, this is one that they say they're going to go on straight and narrow, but you just kind of know they're trying to con you, who has been around. Yeah,
we definitely see some of that, and unfortunately what we're seeing more and more of is we're seeing kids with some really serious mental health issues, and kids as young as 13 or 14 years old who've really had unfortunately experienced a lot of trauma in their life, either through neglect of their parents or through physical or sexual abuse, that's now manifesting itself as they turn 13 or 14 years old, where they're developing their own mental health issues. And unfortunately that manifests through behavior, and unfortunately that manifests to too many contacts with our system. So the con piece isn't really there. The sadder piece is there is that we're seeing kids who really have some serious mental health issues.
You've been around a lot of these children. You've been around a lot of these children or whatever, and you get a sense like, oh God, I think I'm dealing with a criminal, and hypothetically he or she's only 10, 12 years old. I mean, that sixth sense, like, oh, this isn't going to turn out right.
Because you must have seen this over the years, some that have turned out bad.
You know what I mean? Where it's just hopeless if you, or
Yeah, the good news is we don't see that a lot, but who's really savvy on that is we have an excellent group of probation officers in Washington County, and the probation officers that we deal with in correction, there's about, I'm going to underestimate the number. Yeah. There's about 6 to 10 of them that are as experienced as anybody in Minnesota. A lot of them I started working with when I got here in 1998. And they're the ones who are better than any of us at, because they are working not only with the child, but with the family and the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, that they're the ones who can really tell of, somebody who they're going to be concerned about as to whether they'll be successful on probation. Is this social media impacting? Oh, goodness. I want to hear about this. Yes. the number of attorneys who in our office who practice before social media is getting to be smaller and smaller. But it's changed everything. It's changed everything from our adult prosecutions to our juvenile prosecutions. Bullying. When we used to talk to kids a lot about bullying, I said, when I was graduated from high school in 1989 and was in 8th grade in 1985, if I had to bully John, I would have to go up to John and bully him. Now I can sit in my bedroom and do it, and 6 times as many people see me do it.
Yes.
So that's really something that is concerned about us. And, kids don't take negative exposure on social media very well.
Right.
They react to it.
That's right.
Sometimes they react violently.
Yep.
Sometimes they react in a way that on social media. But social media is pervasive throughout all of our investigations, no matter what level it's at, from the forfeitures that our civil division does to the child protection cases that we do in my division to all of our criminal prosecutions. That's really the first thing we look for, is anything on social media.
I was going to ask you in the sense that the fear, I remember as a child or whatever, there was a fear of Totem Town and Red Wing and all this.
My mom was always, make sure you get your act together,
This may not
because
turn out right.
you're heading to Totem Town or wherever she would have them going.
Yeah.
Being the son of a police officer, I'm trying to think of the name in Wisconsin, what it was,
sure.
but I can't remember. But we had the same thing.
Yeah.
I will say kids just seem to be more fearless now.
Fearless.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Even since I started practicing in 1998, there's less fear of their main authority figures or parents. There seems to be less fear of teachers than there was when I started practicing in 1998. And, somewhat less fear of law enforcement and consequences. And in the juvenile system, we're not about consequences. We're about getting you away from our system. We're about that if you continue to come back to our system, what services we can provide you to steer you out of our services. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but having done this work for 22 years, that's what's going to keep people out of our system. Incarcerating them, being punitive with them. We'll do that on the right cases. We'll do that when public safety demands that. But the one thing that we want to do is to give these kids, these kids are only 18-year-old, that's 1/5 of their life in the juvenile system. So we got to make sure when they get out to that 4/5 that they're doing so in a healthy manner. And just not to go too long here, but we just had a young man who I immediately recognized his name when I was dealing with him. And I was dealing with him on a child protection case. And I looked into it further, and we had dealt with him from the age of 12 through 18.
Yeah, you get a trail.
Now he's across the border in Wisconsin. He's got a wife and 3 kids and a full-time job, and he hasn't been in trouble since he was 19 years old, and I think he was 31.
Okay.
So, that is really what we're looking for in the
Yeah.
juvenile system, are those situations.
I remember as a child, there was a person that was a couple of years older, and they said, well, he had been to Red Wing. We knew his first name and we knew Red Wing. We didn't need to know anything else. It was that terrifying.
Well, this guy, my dad's a well-known attorney, and so they moved from St. Paul to Stillwater, and so Dad said, you do know you go to school, and John said, no, I don't have to. My new 2 friends don't have to go to it.
They were old.
Oh, whoa. I mean, did we have the beginning of that? But that's that peer influence, too, is major.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and we always talk about kids commit crime in packs.
Yeah.
You never see that as much in adult prosecution. Kids commit, you'll have kids go into, we had kids go into a lumber store here in Stillwater a few years ago. Well, you had 15 kids in there because that's just how and that's where the peer influence comes from.
Right.
Maybe 2 of those kids wanted to do what they did, but the other 10 followed them right in there.
Did it.
So peer influence for kids is huge, really huge.
Is there any ideal upbringing? I mean, can anything for sure predict that you're going to be a juvenile delinquent? I mean, I call it juvenile.
Trauma is, whether it be trauma because
abuse, yes.
or whether it just be trauma because the parents, because of their own chemical health struggles or mental health struggles, that they don't give the child enough supervision or attention as they should have. Neglect is just as damaging to kids as abuse is. Not having a stable, consistent parent there to show love and attention and supervision and those type of things, just as damaging as physical or sexual abuse for kids.
I don't know if you're going to answer this, but anyway, there's been a shift. I grew up in an era when there was corporal punishment. In other words, you take the belt if they get mauled off or whatever, you slapped them, whatever. And now we're kind of in an era of psychology. I was just kind of wondering what your feel on that is. I mean, I don't know, neither one of them work, but
well, I can even tell you back when I was practicing law in the early 2000s, We used to talk in evaluating some of our physical abuse cases.
Yeah.
Some of the older lawyers, and even myself, would say, you can assault your children. That's in Minnesota law, but it can't be unreasonable.
Right.
And that's still there.
Sure.
It's maybe that's a lousy way of saying it, but punishment of a child is not illegal in Minnesota.
Right.
Malicious punishment of
That's
a child
another story.
Right.
is
right?
what is illegal.
Right.
So I think from a psychology perspective and a social perspective, it does damage kids to physically assault them.
Physically, okay.
And to repeatedly physically assault kids absolutely will provide trauma to that child. So, I know our social services agencies and the great social workers that we work with will tell you, and they know more about it way more than
Sure.
I do, that even occasional isolated issues of physical abuse, if that's not backed up with an apology, if that's not backed up with a reconciliation, that it will be damaging to a child. Absolutely. So.
The pervasiveness of having drugs, the easy access to drugs, scary. As you probably have seen it escalate.
Right. Well, to use a similar comparison,
Yeah.
if John and I wanted drugs in 1985, we had to go out somewhere and get them. Kids can order marijuana cartridges
Yes.
from their bedrooms now
Yes.
and have them delivered somewhere
Right.
else.
Wow.
That's a problem we're really struggling right now with kids. Is there are these marijuana cartridges that they can use in vape pens that will get them as high as going off in the corner or wherever and buying a joint, and they can order them from the comfort of their own bedroom and pick them up. So-
I could talk to him for hours.
Sure.
So they're a little
Yeah.
too accessible. So it's concerning, definitely.
And is the juvenile division have breakdowns? So tell me, are they units or what would you call
Yeah.
them? So can you tell me?
We do both child protection and juvenile prosecution. We
Okay.
have two very experienced lawyers, Carrie Lindstrom and Tricia Lair. They do all of the juvenile prosecution, and we're lucky in Washington County that I can hand them everything and they can deal with it because they're so experienced. We've had an unbelievable huge uptick in child protection cases over the last few years.
Sad.
Like 120% at least.
Oh.
We've had as many child protection cases in June of this year as we probably had in 2 years in the early 2000s. So I think we had 70 cases where we'd normally get about 30 a year. But so we have 3 lawyers that do that, and I back those lawyers up on a lot of those cases. And we are busy on those child protection cases. We have a great community services department that we consult with on investigations, that we consult with on cases that come to court. So
John and I used to both be on the advisory committee, actually, as chairs
Oh.
of that community
Yeah.
advisory committee. You're right; it's a great department.
Yeah.
It's boy, I didn't
I was
realize.
going to.
Well, hang on, I want to hear more on the breakdown.
yeah, and so
See, I told you we had tons of questions.
And then we have Betsy Erpus, who does the truancy, which actually in Minnesota law is wrapped into child protection. So, most of my juvenile division right now, I shouldn't say most of the juvenile division in the Washington County Attorney's Office, we're devoted to issues involving community services and child protection.
Okay.
And that's actually a good thing because that shows that
That's correct.
our crime rate amongst
That's correct.
juveniles isn't where it could be.
Right.
One thing we do a lot with those juvenile prosecution cases is we send them right over to the youth service bureaus that we have here in Washington County. The youth service bureaus in Woodbury, Stillwater, Forest Lakes has a youth area or youth. I can never remember their name, and they're going to hate me for this. Lakes area, I believe it's Lakes Area
Something like
Youth
that.
and
For
Counseling
Forest Lake
Services.
there,
Yeah.
yeah.
They do a great job, and they're addressing those kids' issues in their community, and that way we don't have to see them in court. So while most of my job is devoted to child protection, it's only because I think we have great resources, great prosecutors, and great community partners that can deal with those juvenile prosecution cases.
I was going to say that how many different children come to your doorstep, say in a year? Some
well-
will come twice, but that's why.
And they won't
that's why
necessarily be cases, right? Because you could be telling
Yeah.
the police or letting you know
You may-
that
you may
or
dismiss
the
it or
schools
whatever.
are letting you know
What's
that.
really interesting about juvenile numbers, not only in Washington County, but you'll see this statewide, and I've talked
Yeah.
to a lot of people about this, and you'll see this nationwide. In 1995, our numbers of juvenile referrals regarding prosecution plummeted. And we used to get 3,000 juvenile prosecution referrals.
Wow.
We're down to about 1,200 a year.
Wow.
And there's a whole lot of theories out there. Nobody that I've seen in the literature can pinpoint why that is. There's a really interesting theory that's being advanced by somebody here in Minnesota
Yeah.
that say it's related to smartphone use, where kids are more antisocial in their bedrooms,
Yes.
online, as opposed to being antisocial
Very
out in the
interesting to
community.
me, that
So they have less
theory.
contact with law enforcement, less
Sure.
contact with authority figures. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now is we get about 1,200-1,300 referrals a
'Cause
year.
that was my follow-up question, was that the idea is how much do you cinch and miss, and you only maybe getting a fifth of it? It's hard, it's an estimate out of nowhere.
I would say probably we're getting half of it. Just
Half
to,
of it.
to take an educated guess
Yeah,
off of
that's all
20-some
it
years
is.
experience.
Yeah.
There's plenty of cases out there that police investigate, that are reported, that they're not able
Not
to
gonna
figure
go,
out
or even they miss
who, what,
totally,
or where.
yeah.
Or go unreported.
Yeah.
Right.
There's plenty of
Yeah.
people who
Figure, well, yeah. It's just
Who-
another problem, and then
Right.
move
Yeah.
on.
deal with them themselves.
Tony, are you a parent?
I am.
What are your biggest
gotta have great
concerns?
fears.
'Cause yes, you know what can happen.
I just had a conversation over at our booth with
And that's
a
the
family.
Washington County Attorney's booth.
About sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And it's to me, it's not a fear, but it's something you have to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because there was a point in time that we didn't think we had a problem out here with sex trafficking, and that was in the last 5-6 years we didn't
Yeah,
think
that's
that,
right.
Right.
and we've completely
Yeah,
been
that's right.
educated on that.
Yeah.
What I'm aware of in regarding sex trafficking is there's a lot of people out there that prey on the vulnerabilities of other people. And so that's, I think, is something for all parents to be aware of, is keep in mind of who your kids are hanging out with.
Right.
I told the family that I talked to over there, out of all the factors that we see for young ladies or young men who are being sexually exploited, if there's a presence of an older adult that doesn't seem to fit in there, that's almost a confirming factor that
Right.
that child's being exploited in one way or another. So if you're a parent and you're aware of that, you can intervene on it.
Even if it's a family member sometimes. I mean, you hear a lot
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
scary.
It's amazing the numbers. It's like 35 million. I mean, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
The numbers will scare the heck out of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our office is a real statewide and nationwide leader
Yes.
on both labor trafficking, sex trafficking,
Yeah,
those
they
type
are.
of things. And we look at those numbers, and they really will keep you up at
Yeah.
night sometimes. But again, like I told the family over there, be aware of it.
Yeah.
Don't fear it. Don't keep your kids locked up or anything. Just be aware. And that's even if your kids are straight A this and
Yeah.
whatever and involved in this, you still got to be aware of
Yeah.
who they're with, what they're doing. I have a 15-year-old daughter right now who's getting into cars with friends of hers.
Sure.
That scares the heck out
Yeah, I
of me.
bet. Yeah, I bet.
Whether the driving comes.
Yeah, she starts driving next week.
Yeah, right.
So that scares the
Next
heck out of me
problem,
too.
next problem.
Right, right.
So, but again, we're aware of who she's with. We're
Yeah.
aware of what time she's coming home at night. We're
Yeah.
aware of all those things. We put in a pool so we know who all her friends are.
There you go.
There you go. That's a smart move there.
Get 'em
yeah.
newer side.
you
Yeah, I
gotta-
love
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because you of all people
Yeah.
know what can happen.
We know too much, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Is there any areas that we haven't covered, Tony, that you want our viewers to know about?
I will say, Washington County is looked at, I believe, statewide as we have a great system of professionals who work well together in the juvenile system. We are not here to punish kids. We're not here to punish parents. We're here to keep families together, to provide them services. We're here to keep kids in their home, so provide them services. The kids that present themselves as really a danger to public safety, we'll intervene on those kids and make sure that public safety is served by what we're doing. But we believe for the kids who make bad decisions, public safety is served by keeping them in their homes and getting them services. I think that kind of sums it up of what our philosophy here is in Washington County.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thanks
much
so
for
much.
joining us. Really
Yeah, thank you,
appreciate
Tony.
that.
Yeah, this has been great.